Welcome to the Rising Woman Leaders podcast. We are a sisterhood of women stepping into courage, self-love, and feminine leadership. I'm your host, Meredith Rom, and here I'll be sharing personal insights as well as interviews with inspiring leaders and entrepreneurs so you can create more daily magic in your life and also grow your business without losing sight of spiritual values as a rising woman leader. If you like this podcast, use our hashtag Rising Woman Leaders, follow me on Instagram at Meredith Rom, and sign up for email updates at risingwomanleaders.com. You'll receive all the new and inspiring content, including insights I only share on email. Now get cozy with a cup of tea, light a candle, and grab a journal to listen to this week's magical radio podcast. We're in the final days of the Kickstarter campaign to release my new book, Synchronicity. And I've had so much fun sharing some readings from the book with you. I shared first about heartbreak and vision. I shared about Amma, her teachings of service and finding my voice. I shared a story of love and magic and meeting Shankara. And today I'm going to share a little more about the power of self-love. So it won't be directly a reading from the book, but it'll be a little bit more about a story within the book. If you haven't had a chance yet to pre-order your copy, you are welcome to check out the Kickstarter page, watch the video, make a contribution. This is really the last chance for you to receive an early copy of the book and to help bring this whole project into manifestation. You can visit meredithrom.com and the link is at the top bar for you. You can also search for my name, Meredith Rom, in the Kickstarter website or app. Let's take a few deep breaths here so you can exhale all the air in the body. Take a deep inhale and exhale it out. I recently woke up in the middle of the night after having a bad dream. And in the dream, I was being faced with a scary situation where I felt like I was losing someone I really loved. I woke up to my heart beating fast and my solar plexus tied up in knots. And instinctively, I began listening to my breath. I placed my hands on my body. I welcomed all the sensations and let them wash over and through me. I watched as the stories of my mind ran wild until eventually my breath slowed down, my heartbeat became steady again. I connected to a feeling of love I have in my heart, a love that over the years I have come to know is always with me. And I sent that love to every cell of my body. As I lay awake, I realized I had cultivated full power to love and soothe myself in a time of need, holding myself with compassion the way a mother would hold a child. I just went to an activation, a ceremony last night led by a woman named Kaira, and someone asked her the question, what is the quickest way to awakening? And she replied, loving yourself. Loving yourself is the quickest way to awaken. And the end goal really being when the one who is loving and the one who is being loved within you, when the separation between the two of those dissolve and become one, and you are just having that experience underneath the surface of everything else happening in your life, that is really when you know you have stepped onto a path of full awakening. So self-love has had a huge power in my life, and I'm here today to talk to you about that power. And more than that, I'm here to help you reconnect to a love within yourself so that no matter what happens in your life, whether you're experiencing fear, maybe depression, a broken heart, whatever challenges or difficulties come your way, you know you'll be okay. I believe we all have the power to love ourselves through any challenge or difficulty in our lives. I believe when we tap into the power of self-love, we no longer need to be afraid. And that's really when we grant ourselves the freedom and the courage to live beyond our fear, take risks, and really stand up and share our greatest gifts in the world. And that is more than anything what I want for you. I want you to have the courage to stand up and share your voice and do the things that you feel called to do and share. And it's that activation, that loving yourself, that will create the ripple effect and transformation, so much transformation in our world. So if you listened to one of my earlier book readings about really what was happening in my life when I was living in New York City, you have a little idea of how hard that time really was. So I was going to college and I was feeling pretty stressed and exhausted. I was applying to jobs, working 40 plus hours a week to be in front of a computer. And I started developing this chronic pain in my body. And it would be behind my eye. It would go down one whole side of my body, all the way down my leg, my hip, my foot. And I went to doctors to try and figure out what was happening, but they came back and said, everything on the tests look normal. Here, why don't you try some muscle relaxants or some anti-anxiety pills or even antidepressants. And at the same time, I was like, I tried those things, but they didn't really work. They weren't really addressing the root of the problem. So on top of all of that, I was having a lot of trouble expressing myself. I was really, really afraid to be seen. I had gone through a difficult breakup. My heart was hurting. I felt like I had lost someone I really loved and also a friend, and I was holding some anger and resentment around that. And I remember really just looking in the mirror at that time and not liking the person that was looking back at me, not loving that person that was looking back at me in the mirror. I felt like something was wrong with me. Like, why were all these terrible things happening to me? Around this time, I found yoga. And I remember being in one of my very first yoga classes and being guided into pigeon pose and beginning to feel that intense sensation come up around my hip. And usually I would push it away, ignore it, try to distract myself. But this time I listened and I breathed. I was present with the pain, and after a few minutes, it began to release. So while I thought that my greatest suffering was really about what was happening to me and this pain I was feeling, I realized in that moment that maybe my greatest suffering was really stemming from a lack of self-love, a lack from being fully present with myself. And yoga was the beginning of my path for self-love. And from then on, I really stopped numbing myself out with any of the prescription drugs or alcohol or sugar or anything else. And I started going to yoga. And I began to find relief from the physical pain in my body and the emotional pain in my heart. I began to see how I can move through any challenge, fear, or doubt, because I began to see the power of being really present and loving to myself, holding myself in that love the way a mother would hold a child. And as I got closer and closer in connection to my body and that difficult sensations that I was experiencing, I began to tap into my body's wisdom, my intuition. And that was when I started to see these visions of moving to the West Coast, going to India, opening up to all these dreams I wanted to manifest. And it was the self-love that really gave me the courage to take those steps, one little step in front of the other. So pretty soon I found myself in India, and I eventually fell in love again with this man named Shankara, which you got to hear about how we met in the last reading that I shared on love and magic. And even though I knew it was dangerous to fall in love with this man, because in the beginning he told me, I am so free, I have a connection with you, but if I were to meet someone else, I would explore that connection. I knew I didn't want to pass up the opportunity for this experience of love and magic and synchronicity. So I continued to see this person. We had a beautiful relationship that lasted several months. And at one point we were living together in this guest house in India. We each had our separate rooms. And at the same time, around the same time, I had gone into this 10-day Vipassana retreat. And after the retreat, every morning, Shankar and I would go up to this meditation center and we would sit and meditate for an hour. And then we'd have breakfast and begin our days. Now, I want to tell you about this one experience I had. There was one morning when I showed up in front of Shankar's door to knock on the door, to run up to the top of the hill to the retreat center for our morning routine. And it was early in the morning, and I came to knock on the door, and there were another woman's shoes outside of the door. And it was early in the morning. I knew, okay, whoever is in there must have been there all night. And it was so hard. I felt like it was my worst fear coming true, that the person I loved was in that room with another woman. And part of me wanted to just knock on the door and slam it down and yell and express my anger and my frustration. But another part of me, my wiser self, my higher self, said, no, it's time to go to your practice. And I turned around and I ran up the hill to the meditation center, threw off my shoes, walked right back into my meditation seat, and I just let everything I was feeling come to the surface. Tears streamed down my face, and I began doing the practice of Vipassana, which is to simply notice the sensations moving through my body. I noticed the feeling of my solar plexus tied up in knots, the feeling of my heart, the grief in my heart. I noticed my heart beating. I just allowed it all to be, and I became a witness to it all. And over the course of the hour, my breath began to steady, and I really came into a state of stillness. And I practiced metta meditation, loving kindness at the end. Loving kindness, this practice is where we first connect to a feeling of love within ourselves. And then we send that love to every cell of our body. So here I was again, just sending that love to my whole body, being there for myself. And soon I began to have an overflowing, a feeling of love that wanted to flow out from me. And I sent it to different teachers I had met, friends along my path. I sent it to even Shankara, this person who I felt was causing conflict in my life. And I ultimately was able to even send love to whoever that woman was with his shoes outside his door. And that was such a powerful moment for me, to have gone into this pretty enormous trigger, and then within the course of an hour to have immediately soothed and loved and been there for myself. And I look back on that situation to see that this man actually gave me a huge gift. He showed me the immense power, the love I had within myself that I could use for myself whenever I needed it. And that's the power of self-love. That's the power of forgiveness. That's the power of choosing a different way. That's the power of loving without conditions, without trying to change someone else. That was when I released this other person from being a demon, and I released myself from being a victim. I chose to move forward from a place of love, having connected to a love within myself. And ever since that moment, I have known that whatever challenge, difficulty, or suffering that I experience in my life, that it's okay. I don't need to numb myself out. I have the tools to be fully present, loving, and there for myself. And that has set me free. So my mission is really to share this message of self-love, to share the tools and how I've been able to develop it in my life. Because I really do believe that self-love is what will set us free from our fears and our doubts. It'll help us to take bigger risks and to trust in ourselves and our gifts in the world. To know no matter what happens along the way, we'll be okay. So the key things that I learned were around, first, the yoga practice, being fully present with my body and my breath, whatever sensations were there. And then taking that a step further into meditation, the vipassana practice of accepting impermanence, accepting that everything in our body is going to arise and pass away. And we can just become a witness to it all. We can release our stories of what we're feeling and just experience them as pure sensations. It also really helped me in my life when I was able to shift my mindset from one of self-discipline to self-devotion. So for a long time, I felt like I needed to show up to my yoga mat, my meditation cushion every day and be very structured about it. And I kind of wanted to rebel after a while. I felt like this is not something I even want to do anymore. But what I found was when I was able to shift it into a sense of devotion, I really reminded myself what I was doing, why I was doing it, and who I was doing it for. Really for myself, really for spirit, really for my own awakening and the awakening of all the other people I want to help in this world. If you're curious about learning more techniques, I really recommend many different self-care techniques. I have another podcast that you can go back, learn more about the art of falling in love with yourself, how to fall in love with yourself, or share some of my favorite self-care techniques. So that's something available to you if you want to go deeper in that. But today, if you leave and you only remember one thing, if you only remember one thing from my whole message, my book, everything, all I want you to remember is that at your core and your essence, you have a love inside of yourself that you can access anytime you need it. This is something I was able to find, and this is something that you have within yourself as well. And I hope that you go out and you use these tools to connect to this love, so you remember that whatever happens in your life, whether you're experiencing fear, a depression, a broken heart, anything else, you know that you'll be okay. You'll have the awareness and the tools you need to move through any challenge or difficulty. And of course, if you feel called to go deeper and to learn more, I invite you to pre-order the book, to learn more about these stories. I invite you to even contact me personally. I'd be happy to talk with you one-on-one, to share more about what I've learned and to hear what you are going through. But when I was lying awake in the middle of the night, that story I shared in the beginning of waking up from a bad dream, I was left with an insight that I wanted to leave you with today. Whatever challenge or difficulty you are facing in your life right now, I invite you to see it rather as this bad thing that's happening to you, but rather to see it as a calling, an opportunity, and a sacred duty to show up with more love within and for yourself. So I will bring my hands to my heart center, sending you off with so much love from my heart to yours. Namaste.